will be implemented just ahead.
Plus, a new video is surfaced showing former Holyoke City Councilor Wilmer Poyamoto being interviewed as part of the Russian military. That story coming up.
And a warmer weather pattern gets started as we head into this weekend. I'll have the latest in my First Alert forecast.
Getting answers for Western Massachusetts. This is Western Mass News.
A new effort to tackle crime in Springfield is now in place with police officers walking the streets. Welcome to Western Mass News at 6 on this Thursday. I'm Chris Pisano.
And I'm Abby Carnevale. Western Mass News reporter Glenn Kittle joins us live in Springfield with more on how the community feels about these foot patrols. Glenn?
Yeah, Chris, Abby, the goal of these foot patrols is for the officers to build personal relationships with the communities they serve. Now, some city leaders believe that the more confidence that people have in the police force, the more information that people would be willing to give up to help stop criminals. Springfield police officers Tequila Taylor Evans and Luis Aguilar are walking the beat in Indian Orchard, part of the city's new foot patrols. The goal is to create personal relationships with the community that will lead to person-to-person crime-stopping methods.
I think the neighborhood's going to appreciate seeing it, the residents and also the business community on these walking patrols. Hospitality, engagement, community engagement, and also deters people if they're thinking to do the wrong thing.
Taking a look at the latest Springfield crime statistics, so far this year, there have been 13 homicides, 9 of those committed with a firearm. By this time last year, Springfield had logged 25 homicides, 23 of those committed with a firearm. Springfield City Councilor Brian Santaniello tells Western Mass News these walking patrols could continue the department's crackdown on crime in a different way.
When walking patrols are out there, people build confidence in these walking patrols. They start sharing information with these walking patrols. That will reduce crime.
We asked people in the Springfield community how they feel about the police foot patrols. Longtime Indian Orchard resident Patricia Voisin tells us she welcomes this initiative.
We had them years ago and I enjoyed them back. I said my brother was an officer at one time that walked the orchard.
We also asked Darrell Lee Jenkins Jr. Resource Center Executive Director Juanita Batchelor, who lost her son to gun violence. She sent us a statement saying in part, quote, "I think having police walking in the neighborhoods is a good idea. Getting to know the community you serve is truly important, as long as you're not coming in with judgment. If we could get the bond and trust with communities and police, maybe people would feel more comfortable on speaking up in order to keep their community safe from violence. It is definitely going to take a lot of time. It's not going to happen overnight." The officers on these walking patrols are being asked to get out of their cars whenever they can during their shift. This initiative is being funded by police overtime funds that get allocated by the city. Reporting live in Springfield, Glenn Kittle for Western Mass News.
All right, Glenn, thank you for that live report. New video has surfaced this week.